So without further ado, Keela, come on up. Come on and join us.
Thank you.
What is Urbanspoon, and why is it cool and amazing?
Very good. Urbanspoon is a consumer site and app, more importantly, to help consumers find better food. So our whole focus is on restaurants, restaurant reviews, restaurant discovery, but increasingly also in helping people to find great dishes at a restaurant and being able to have a great experience even inside the restaurant as well. So shortly we'll also be launching a new in-restaurant feature called Food Dictionary, straightforward, but basically helping you to understand what it is that you're ordering when you're ordering exotic ingredients like kohlrabi or whatnot, and you are not sure if that's a good idea. We'll
what is kohlrabi?
Help you out. It is a vegetable, actually.
Oh,
it is a vegetable in the cabbage family.
Got
yeah,
it.
yeah.
How long have you been CEO for?
Since December.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I started in December.
So cool.
It's been great.
And so, what has been the biggest surprise? So Urbanspoon is owned by IAC.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
And so technically, you're part of a public company.
Yep.
What has been the biggest surprise of running the company relative to what your expectations was so far?
Well, I think coming in, I really expected that we were about restaurant discovery. That you think of Urbanspoon, you think of the iconic shake feature, right? Which is, I don't know where I'm going to eat, I shake to find out, and that I get a good restaurant recommendation.
I always thought that was just to burn calories before you eat.
Well,
That's actually meant for
it's
discovery.
good for that too.
Okay.
But yeah, it was featured on an early Apple commercial about iPhone.
Yes.
And in fact, about 10% of our customers use the shake feature very regularly. But in point of fact, more and more people, and in fact, at this point, almost the majority of people who are coming to Urbanspoon already have a restaurant in mind, which makes sense, right? I mean, they have heard about something, maybe from their friends, or a new place opened up in their neighborhood, and they want to check it out. And so they're coming to Urbanspoon for the menus. We're one of the few sites that, in addition to having, we of course link out to a restaurant's website if they have a menu, but we also allow people to take photos of the menu. So
cool.
Even if it's a place that changes up their menu a lot, just getting a feel for what they serve is really quite nice. And more of our traffic, that particular traffic that is interested in menus, is up over 100% year over year. So it's growing incredibly quickly. And so we're shifting midway. It used to be that the origin story of Urbanspoon was about being restaurant discovery, and now we're about helping you once you've figured out that you think you want to go to a place, or you know you want to go, what dish to get, is it a place that's going to be gluten-free friendly? Is it a place that is going to accommodate, will they take reservations? What's the wait time like? There are all sorts of, other aspects to eating that
it becomes such a voyeur culture. I feel like we'll look at a menu. Like, we'll just spend half an hour looking at a menu, thinking of everything that we want to eat. You can only order one thing. But there's always this,
True.
oh, I'm missing out. Like, oh, these other 8 other things on the menu is good.
Well, not to mention photos. We all love food photos.
Yeah.
Except when they are excessive on our Facebook feeds, and then we're like, okay, enough. I don't need to see every single thing you ate.
Yeah.
But on Urbanspoon, when you go there intending to understand what their food is like, people, they'll just keep browsing through incredible numbers of photos.
Yeah.
So.
All right, so let's get back to you. But what has been the biggest surprise for you coming in and running this company as CEO?
Well, I mean, I think the fact that we have the opportunity to move into a new space around in-restaurant experience has been a very pleasant surprise. The other thing that has been kind of interesting has been basically figuring out how to scale internationally but stay domestic. So I think that that's an interesting.
How much of your traffic right now comes from international?
It's less than, right now we're pretty dominantly US, but I'd say about 20% or so is international. Actually, from a per capita perspective, we're stronger in Australia and Canada than we are here in the US, without actually having people in Australia or Canada. So that has been an interesting learning, is how do you develop a small business in the US but still appeal to people internationally, and be able to grow that, especially when you're ad sponsored. A lot of people think that you need on the ground editors and people who are selling ads and so forth in each region, and we found that that's not necessarily true.
How big's the team at Urbanspoon right now?
We are about 50 people, which is small.
Cool. Yeah.
It is still small. Our closest competitors are quite a bit bigger. Open Table, I think, is over 600 people, which isn't really a competitor. They're more of a partner. But Yelp, I think, is over 1,000 or so. So we subscribe a little bit more to the lean sort of keep it small philosophy. It also leads to a nice profitable business, which is always good. So yeah.
That's great. So we'll come back to Urbanspoon in a moment. Why don't we talk about the journey that kind of led up to here? So you were at about half a dozen different internet companies before you got to Urbanspoon. But I saw you went to Stanford for 2 degrees. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Santa Cruz.
Nice.
Yeah. As you can tell from my awesome tan. Oh, wait a second. No, that's not true. It never has been. So.
All right, so you grew up in Santa Cruz. You went to Stanford for undergrad, Miss Smarty Pants. And then did you go straight into grad school, or did you work in between it all?
Well, it was interesting. So when I was at Stanford, it was sort of, the internet was just starting to become a thing. And it became evident while I was there that this was going to be big. I grew up in an interesting scenario. So both my mom and dad were software developers.
Whoa.
And my father...
So nobody ever talked. It was just silence all the time.
Well, not so much, but yeah, talkative software developers. It was interesting. My father passed away when I was young, and so my mom
Would you get like programs for your birthday? It's like,
you know,
hey, here's a new application, Keela.
Yeah, I joke that my friends were forced to learn, piano when they were little, and I was, encouraged, nearly forced to program, right? So we did that at home, and it was just kind of
That's so cool. Wait, like what is it? Because my mom, God bless her, would make my friends when they came over take grammar lessons with me. Which really explains why I had so few friends growing up. Right. But explain to me what these coding household things were. How did that work exactly?
Well, I mean, we had whatever my mom would actually bring either computers, sometimes these huge floppy disks. They were huge when I was a little kid, back home, and she would basically orient us into what it meant to program. So it was, if anything, going into undergrad, I thought I was kind of rebelling by not being in computer science. And then I realized halfway through, oh, wow, I was wrong. I was really, really wrong. So I scrambled, and I quickly took some more
But you were like the young
classes.
Matthew Broderick doing war games, right? Like, it must have been kind of cool to do all this computer stuff when you were a kid.
It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun, and especially once you got to the point where you could actually build games or little apps where you can have outcomes that even you couldn't predict because
And what game did you build? Did you ever build a game?
Oh gosh, I mean at the time, they weren't even all that graphical, right? I mean they were just adventure games and so forth.
Like where they respond with the words, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, those are the best.
Exactly. But I love building those, and so so in school when I actually lucked out. I got luck and effort. I got an internship with Sun Microsystems. And this was in 1993. And I realized then, okay, the internet is going to be huge. I need to figure out what I'm doing.
Did you really know in 1993 the internet was going to be huge?
Yeah, I did. It was quite apparent.
Can I ask you what's going to be huge next?
It's interesting.
Do you have any inside tips there now?
So I I basically decided that that is something that I needed to be a part of. And that being said, as I came out of school, I got, to answer your earlier question, which I never did directly, I ended up doing sort of what they called a co-terminal master's program at Stanford. So I did it at the same time I was doing undergrad.
Co-terminal master's program.
That's right. So
Sounds
I got both degrees in my 4 years. So I basically was then deciding between going out and being a developer or
so this is what, 1995? Okay.
Did I want to be a software developer, or did I want to go into the business side? And I decided to join Bain & Company and do the business consulting thing for a little while, mostly because I realized as I was kind of acting as a product manager for Sun Microsystems that I didn't know what I was doing, and that probably was something that I should remedy before.
What did your mom say when you left software engineering? Was she supportive?
Yeah, she was. She was. I mean, I think it's funny. I think she's always seen me as running a company. That's what she's wanted for me. So she definitely was encouraging.
But even as a kid.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I was a pretty geeky kid. I was definitely a geeky kid. And you know,
this isn't like the night at the Roxy Club, right? This is called Startups Uncensored. I think
right.
you're with
you're
with your
as
people.
An example, and
right?
I'm in.
Just look out. I mean, you can tell. Like there's, you know, I love you all, but you look pretty geeky to me, as do I, right? Like none of us are like winning the cool kids of 10 years old award, you know.
But how many of you asked for office supplies as a kid for Christmas? Okay, because that's what I did. That's how geeky I was. Very geeky.
There you go. Touché, Keela.
Yeah, there you go. I like things organized.
Yeah.
Put into place.
Did you really ask for office supplies?
I did. I honestly did.
Wow.
Yeah. Organizers.
All right. So but there were these expectations that you were going to go do. This is kind of interesting to me. There were expectations in your household that you were going to kind of excel in the business field.
Yes. Well, and I knew early on that I was interested in the convergence of business and technology and how they could work together. And so yeah, I mean, even when I joined Bain, I wanted to work in their technology group and in their small business mergers and acquisitions, those areas.
Okay.
But in point of fact, it turned out that no internet companies at the time thought that they needed any consulting help. So by 98, I decided, well, this is moving too fast. I've got to jump ship, and that's when I joined at the time, small company called Progressive Networks that became Real Networks that had the Real Player, and that was another one of those sort of. I felt it was fairly inevitable in 1998 that we would have audio and video on the web. It turned out that they didn't end up being the format that dominated it, but certainly it was a very fast-growing and fun ride.
And so where were you working when the whole crash happened in 2001?
I was working at Real at the time. So I stayed there through the ascent. And
they were a private or public company then?
They were public, yeah.
So what was that like?
Well, there were a lot of people who thought that they had a lot of money that didn't, right? Or that ended up not having it. So I feel...
It's an interesting case study. What were those people like before and what were they like afterwards?
Yeah, it's an interesting case study. I won't name any names. No, I mean, there were a lot of people driving around in fancy cars, all of a sudden, and people were obsessed by the stock price. They were just sort of watching it day in and day out, and you knew that it didn't feel right that we weren't focused primarily on products and what we were building for customers. Not only that, but it was really interesting because we had applicants for jobs like product management who otherwise would have been in investment banking, right? They were clearly trying to make it rich quickly and had no interest in actually building interesting consumer technology products.
Yeah. All right, so you're there through the bubble. What are you thinking as the world? You called the internet 10 years ahead of everybody else, right? Little baby Mozart genius here,
a few people were on that boat as well, but yeah.
And so what are you thinking when everything crashes? Do you think to yourself, hey, I should get out of this industry, I should go try my hand at something else?
No, it honestly never occurred to me. We're seeing so many of these waves, and I've now been through several of them. I don't see the long-term trend being any different. I believe that what we are building with technology is improving people's lives in many small but collectively significant ways. And so I haven't ever felt that moment of regret that oh no, this isn't going to be a good idea.
Yeah.
I mean, I regretted a bit that I wasn't worth as much as I was at some point in time, but I didn't spend ahead of what I had. So
later on in your career, you ended up at Amazon, and you helped launch the Kindle Fire, right?
Well, actually, I worked the first 2 years on the Fire phone.
Fire phone.
So it was a really interesting experience. So they worked for 2 years after I left and just shipped recently. So
what was it like working for Bezos? Well, I mean, we hear so many stories, right? demanding, genius? What was your take on being at a company driven by somebody like him?
I think both are true, right? I think he is incredibly smart and very, demanding, I think is an appropriate word. He has a very clear vision of what he wants to build. And so I found, on the one hand, that environment to be very inspiring, because I felt it was a great, one of the reasons I wanted to go work at Amazon was I felt like they had scaled so effectively, right? I mean, tens of thousands of employees, and yet they still have really high quality people there, and they're able to innovate and move quickly, and they've got the fire in their belly. And there's so many companies who've gotten to that point and then just slow down.
And what do they do differently? Is it a cult of Bezos? Is it just that his personality is so strong and dominant, or is there something institutionally about the company that makes it be able to innovate even though it's so large?
I think there's a lot of process at Amazon that helps. And it almost sounds like an oxymoron. But so, for example, they actively try to break up teams when they get too big. So once they get to about 200 people or so, they will try to make it more autonomous and not have interdependencies between teams. And that even to the extent where you might have some overlap in your charter, or you might end up telling two stories out in the market to customers or so forth, they're willing to pay that tax in order to have the fast, small groups who are independent. The other thing that they do, which I thought was very interesting, and I've gone back and forth as to whether or not I actually want to implement it at other companies, is they don't do any PowerPoint presentations at all.
I love that. That's
yeah.
Genius.
Well,
Oh
although be careful what you wish for, because they do.
They do it all on napkins. You're saying
they do full-on documents. So if you go into a meeting, you need to write up 5 to 7 pages, single space. This is no cheating here, right? Of what your suggestion is, what the alternatives were that you considered, what data you have to bring to bear, and you lay it all out. And then you have the most interesting meeting. So everybody comes into the room, and you sit in utter silence as everybody in the room reads this document. That if you wrote it, you're sort of sitting there going like, okay, what do I do now? Can I do my email? It's kind of like, or do I reread my own doc? That's weird. And then basically at the end, there's a conversation about it. And one of the things I think Jeff is very effective at.
Why do they not want PowerPoint? Is the idea that it's too show and telly?
Yeah, basically that it's too manipulative. That basically when you're coming to the table, you should be overt about the pros and cons of your argument and the alternatives, and be willing to accept that somebody may choose an alternative that is not your recommendation.
How interesting.
So yeah, and honestly, the meetings, because you're clear about what you want as an outcome, what decisions need to be made, what your assumptions are, they're just so much more efficient.
Was Amazon a meeting-heavy culture?
Well,
it feels like in large companies you can't help but have that lots of meeting kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I was in a lot of meetings, but I think part of that was sort of level, right?
Yeah.
I think for most people who work at Amazon, they probably wouldn't characterize it as such.
That's great. So what's the single biggest thing that you learned at Amazon that you've taken with you in your business career? What's the one most important lesson you learned there that you would pass on to this crew of misfits?
I would say the most important thing is hire great people, which sounds trite, but it is so important to not compromise, to not hire someone because you really need that position filled, but to tough it out.
What was Amazon's hiring process like?
So again, rigorous and thought out. So they.
Has anyone here worked at Amazon? No.
Oh, good! I can make stuff up.
Wow! All right.
I'm just kidding. I'm not going to. So they have you have your normal interview loop, right? Your number of people, usually about 4 or 5 people that you meet, sometimes more. But each person is assigned a competency, something that they are at least one thing that they are expected to focus on in the interview process. And by the end of that interview, they need to be able to say whether or not that candidate is above or below, sort of the average at Amazon. And
how interesting. So what would be examples of those competencies?
Well, I mean, you might even have a competency like, is this person frugal, right? Is this person data-driven? Is this person, you know, somebody who can make tough decisions in the face of opposition? Right?
I love this. This is like a 70s kung fu movie where you have to pass different levels, like
it is.
Learn from different masters.
Absolutely, right? So you've got, everybody's got their role to play in the interview process. And you're not allowed to gossip about a candidate in between the interviews. And so after the fact, you write up your notes and you have the conversation. The other thing that I think is pretty interesting is that they always have one person on the loop who is not in the hiring team, who has no stake in the game, right? So they are a disinterested party, and their whole role is to make sure that the hiring group is not lowering their standards in order to make a hire.
Wow.
And I thought that was also
that?
great. Well, I mean, the person is called a bar raiser, and their role is to make sure that they've set and keep a very high hiring bar.
It's like a referee. You have a referee.
It is, and so the bar raiser is somebody who's gone through many interviews while there. So, and they have come to help define the norm, define the.
So one thing I noticed too is you had a VP title before you went to Amazon, and then Amazon is a big company, right? But you moved to director title.
Yeah.
Was that? It's interesting. I've had a lot of people that I've interviewed and met that just title-wise won't take that step backwards. Was that a consideration at all for you, or how would you recommend to the group here that they think about it?
Yeah, I would say don't worry about it that much, right? That ultimately it comes down to responsibility, and I've gone up and down in salary and in title, in different roles, but what I've looked for is getting a breadth of experience. So that I'm sort of building my capabilities as a leader, as a manager, and if they're in the case of Amazon, although I didn't know what I was going to be working on when I joined, I knew that it was a new technology that they were excited about. I knew that it was in hardware, which I hadn't had experience in, and I knew that there were aspects of Amazon that I wanted to learn from. So those three things really drew me to that opportunity, and the fact that the title wasn't amazing was fine.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
So I think this is so interesting. I want to dive into this. Again, audience, how many of you are working at a tech company in LA right now? Raise your hands. All right, so about a third audience. What's interesting is of the 70 guests or so that we've had, a lot of them have been CEOs, but I would say the vast majority are founder CEOs.
Yeah.
And so it's really interesting for me to have you here, because I think it seems like you've much more mapped out and purposely, like you had a philosophy about how to approach your career, right? Learn different things.
Yep.
Let's say somebody that's relatively early on starting their career, what advice would you give them of how to think about their career over the long haul? It seems like you said it in part.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the advice I would give is to seek chaos, to seek diversity of the things that you're going to work on, to get yourself those experiences, right? That specializing early on is not a good plan. Basically, if you can, put yourself in an environment, and small businesses tend to be these types of environments, where you can try your hand at a number of different aspects of the business. And
so what's the widest range that you saw? Obviously, you never really did engineering, right? But you've had head of marketing positions. Mm-hmm. What are some of the craziest things you've done at companies that were outside your core marketing or operating skills? Right.
Well, so at Real Networks, they were kind of reorging, changing every 6 months to a year, and those of us who were doing well there could raise our hands and say, okay, I want to work on this or I want to work on that. So early on, I did international marketing. I was chief privacy officer for a while. That wasn't the best of times, but it was interesting. I did business development, and I spent a lot of time in LA here, kind of negotiating contracts. So just kind of both geographically and from a skill set perspective, trying out a number of different things.
And you never felt that kind of hurt your career advancement doing those different things?
No, I didn't. I mean, I knew that my love was in product development, and that was always something that I wanted to center back on. And I've done marketing and I like marketing, but ultimately in roles where I don't get a say on what we're building, I think that's not a good fit for me. Okay. But I liked the idea of getting that diversity early on.
Yeah. So I'd love to get your thoughts on the interview process, both from the perspective of the interviewer, but also the interviewee. I mean, you've won over now some pretty high-profile positions, right? And even just maybe we'll dive into what the interview process was like at IAC and with Barry Diller. Mm-hmm. But what advice would you give folks when they're interviewing for a job? I mean, you must have a whole treasure trove of do's and don'ts.
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, one obvious do is to know who you're talking to, right? Not just from a perspective of doing your research as to the individuals as much as possible, but also know the product. I'm surprised by how many people will come in for an interview at Urbanspoon and not have used our app all that much, right? And it's to me,
it's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean that's sort of basic, right? You should have a perspective on what you'd change, what is not right, because none of us are perfect, and it's okay to have a critique available for a company that you intend to go work for. I'd say in terms of other prep, in general, when I am asked questions about strategy, I go back to my days of management consulting. And in the days of management consulting, we had lots of templates, sort of our strategy frameworks, if you will. And nowadays they're online. Mm-hmm. A lot of them are just out there, but it's good to make sure that you hit all the bases, right? So you're thinking about both the internal factors when you're being asked a strategic question and the external factors. And again, it's remarkable how many people will dive into one particular vein and then not come back and say, well, what are the competitors doing? Or what are your capabilities? What are your internal competencies? What are your customers asking for? And so being able to sort of go across a range of different angles on a question.
And do you ever find that you change your style? Do you change your style of how you interview based upon who's across the table, or are you pretty consistently just who you are?
I try to be who I am, right? Because ultimately, if it's not a fit, then I'm probably not going to be happy there very long. And I remember going into consulting, I had to wear suits. And I don't like wearing suits. And pantyhose are horrible. They're horrible, right? And I had to wear these regularly with heels. And I'm like clickety-clacketing up a hill or down a hill. And at the time, I remember, so John Donahoe, who's head of eBay, he was a partner on the case that I was working on at Bain. And it was all the way up one of the like really crazy San Francisco streets, and he's a very tall man, and he's got this very long stride, and he's just kind of powering up this hill, and I'm in this tiny, the suits and the heels, and it was not comfortable.
Yeah, I bet.
I'm not going to go there again.
Yeah.
Not doing that again.
So what was the interview process? Did you have to interview with Barry Diller?
No, actually, I interviewed. I was glad that they had me interview with the Urbanspoon team primarily, but then I also met with several people from. At the time, I reported into the Ask.com group. Yeah. So I interviewed with the CEO there and several of their
what's the IAC culture like? I've heard that it's very combative, but like you fight out ideas. I've heard it's very similar actually to Amazon. That you have to be prepared. You have to be ready to defend your ideas at all times. It's really smart people, and it's not really passive aggressive. It's just aggressive.
Right. Well, it's more of an East Coast culture, I think. But
what's that mean? What's the East Coast?
Well,
culture?
I mean, I do think they're going to say what's on their mind, right? I mean, it's not. Yeah, you're right. There's not that. Well, you could do it differently this way. It's like, no, that's a bad idea. So, but I like that. So what I've found fantastic as a small business within IAC is that they've been really good about giving latitude. Surprisingly so. I was not expecting that. To be able to make independent decisions. Now, you need to have your ducks in a row, right? You need to come with, here's the data, here's what I'm working on, but they've been very supportive. So.
Got it. But the business has its completely own P&L?
Yes. We have an independent P&L, and we're
But you still work off a budget, right? It's not like you keep all the profit from Urbanspoon and just can reinvest it. It needs to go into the main entity, right?
That's right. But at the same time, they recognize that we are a growth company. And so, so we're able to say, look, here are the areas where we want to reinvest.
But you have to ask for a budget at the beginning of the year, and you work off of that.
Now, they have a more flexible budget system than several other companies. So they do revisit it throughout the year several times. So you're not stuck with, which I mean, is wise, right? I mean, who can predict 15 months in advance what you're going to need by way of headcount or where the opportunities are? It's nonsense.
And so what's your vision of what you want Urbanspoon to be? 5 years from today, what is Urbanspoon?
So what I would love to see is for Urbanspoon to be the app that you bring out anytime you are thinking about or walking into a restaurant, right? It's not that we need you to have...
For meal discovery.
Well,
or reviews of the...
Any number of things that might be, whether it be before the restaurant or when you're in the restaurant. So if it's because you want to know what the best dish is to order there, you want to understand what the menu means, you want to get a wine pairing, you want to pay the bill quickly, any number of different, again, small but collectively meaningful pain points are areas that, because we're laser focused on food and dining, are areas that we're wanting to address.
Let's do a quick poll. How many folks here currently use your mobile device when you go to restaurants to augment the experience, whether it's menus, pricing, anything? Okay, so about a fourth of the room, a third of the room. That's a good start.
And you're early adopters, right? So, I mean, there's a lot of people who don't even know that they can look up a menu.
And so just blurt it out. Like, what are the things you use it for? Is it for a dish? Like, what do you use the apps for? Recommendations. Recommendations of dishes.
Price.
Price. What stuff's going to cost? But when you say price, don't you see the price when you get to the menu, or do you just want to know? Oh, got it. All right. So price on dishes you don't see the price on.
Discounts.
Oh, I like that. That's discounts.
Yeah.
So.
There's an app called Mobile.
Check-in deals.
So what are if you had a bet on one or two value props, it's really going to make somebody take their phone out, right, to augment that in-dining experience. What are the big bets that you're making?
I think, well, so one of the really interesting plays that we're looking to partner with rather than build directly is going to be in payments. That it's sort of, I don't believe that in 5 years' time we're going to be paying the bills the way that we are. Now, whether it's because you're going to do a touch payments with an NFC and that's how it's going to run, or if it's going to be in the cloud, which I think is a little bit more compelling, because then you can actually store some of your preferences and you can get special offers based on what you like. I definitely believe that is the direction everybody's heading.
Got it. So the idea is that people will pull out their phone, go to Urbanspoon, and they can pay for their meal, they can get awards, they can get discounts right there.
Yeah, I think that is definitely the direction we're heading.
That's cool.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see what happens as that intersects with like the dating experience, right? When you like first take out somebody, and it's like, I'm just gonna use my phone, whether you get like cred for it or you get knocked for it. Probably as long as you're paying for the meal, you still get credit for it, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, of course, IAC between Tinder and Match and others, we've got some insight as to what's going on in the dating experience as well.
I actually think they should build an app that combines Tinder and meals. As I swipe through girls, I just want to see different meals and realize now that I'm married, I can't date any of those girls, but I can still have that meal. Can you make that happen?
Oh, I'll work on that.
Can we call Barry now?
Yeah.
I've done live calls here on stage before. I'm not above calling Barry to make this happen if we can close the deal.
Yeah.
All right. And so what else? What else is part of that? Was the first bet is payments.
Yeah. Well, again, I think that there are a lot of small areas. I'll ask the audience. How many of you are annoyed when you show
Barry,
up?
is that you? No? All right.
When you show up at a restaurant and there's, a 45-minute wait. Does that happen a few times?
Worst.
Yeah. So it might be good to know that that's what's going on and know to expect that, so you don't arrive and get the parking and, get out. So it's It is interesting, but people eat out a lot. It turns out a lot of our disposable income ends up going to dining, and it's fascinating that
What percentage? Do you know what percentage of our income goes to?
I don't know that off the top of my head, but I know it is
You can make it up. Nobody here is going to know.
Okay, well, let's say 20%.
Oh my God! What? That's crazy.
It's higher than that on outside dining. But people will obsess about, or they'll spend the time to research a purchase on Amazon of like a $30 toy or gift for someone, right? But you think, how often do you drop $30 on a lousy meal? It happens all the time, right? Yeah. And so our charter, our goal is to make sure that that happens very, very rarely, that so everybody can enjoy.
What's the culture like?
Their dining
What's
experience.
the culture like in Urbanspoon? Still small team?
It
You
is.
still feel like
It's
it's you versus the
fun.
world?
I mean,
Everybody's in New York?
No, actually in Seattle.
Oh, they are. They're all in
So
Seattle.
IAC is in New York, and so but no, everybody's in Seattle, and it's small, it's fun. We're in the weeds. I mean,
Who's your
I'm in the
least
weeds
favorite
a lot.
employee? Give us their
and
name.
I'm going to tell
what
you
do
that.
they look like?
I'm going to absolutely
their
tell you
LinkedIn
about that.
profile.
Can I? No.
No.
I'm not going to tell you that.
But how would you describe your team culture?
Well, so we're agile, like everybody else, pretty much. But we have a few things that we do that I think are fun and unique. So every other week we do a dev day. So this is it's not quite a hackathon. It is a day where developers, and for that matter, other folks who want to participate in Dev Day can work on whatever they want, as long as it is potentially shippable code. So cool. It's sort of an outlet for, if a developer is super annoyed by some amount of tech debt, or there's a new feature that they really, really want to try out.
And how often do you do this again?
Every other week for a full day, so about 10% of the time.
I love this. It's great.
Yeah.
And so everything that's built, what percentage of stuff built becomes shippable code? Like, what do you
Almost
ship?
all of it. It's very rare
Really?
that we don't ship. Yeah, absolutely. And what's nice is
and
also...
all the engineers get to decide whatever they want to work on.
Yeah.
Do they
Absolutely.
end up self-organizing into teams, or do they more often work by themselves?
Yeah, no. So they do an engineering stand-up before the day and talk about what they want to work on, and invite others to participate as well.
And what's the coolest thing you've seen come out of this?
Well, one of the things I enjoy the most, because I'm an active contributor now to Urbanspoon, is we have this little what we call a spoon feed, which is a service that basically in the app or on the website you can say I want to help Urbanspoon. And it will geolocate you and tell you which restaurants around you are missing a photo or a menu or hours.
That's cool.
And so you can contribute right there. But okay, I've got 10 minutes before an event, and so I can go take a walk around and enter in the information. So it's obviously very beneficial to our service, but it's also something that our active contributors have really adopted and like. So.
Yeah, isn't it crazy when you find those really engaged people and they just want to? I mean, there must be somebody that's left 10,000 reviews or filled in 10,000 pieces of data for Urbanspoon.
Well over 1,000. Yeah, absolutely.
And you got to think, like, what do you do all day otherwise? Right? Like,
right.
God bless you, but really.
Yes, seriously. I mean, we're so thankful for people who do that, and they're part of our Prime program. So we have a special program and a message board. For our primes, and so for example, today for lunch,
So you did take something else from Amazon, didn't you?
Oh yes, well yes. Yeah, basically that program has been around before, but no, I took them out to lunch today. A bunch of LA-based primes and bloggers. So
how cool! How many of them?
Fun. 5 of them.
What was the most insightful piece of feedback you got from them? What was the most helpful piece of feedback you got?
I think, well, they of course want very specific tools as very regular contributors, right? And so there's always this balance that you have to make between how much do you build for your 1 to 2% of very, very active customers versus how much do you build for the masses. In our case, it's particularly tricky because our 1 to 2% are also those who are contributing into our service. And so we can't just say, oh, well, 98% of customers do X. Well, if they're the 98% who don't contribute, then we can't afford to ignore the customers who are active contributors. So we have to balance those. Yeah. But yeah, there were some good suggestions for how they manage their wish lists and being able to see them so that they can plan out where they intend to go out to dinner or lunch.
So talk about I would love to know a little bit about your management philosophy, but to make it more specific, do you have any little tricks or tactics that you use as far as when you do meetings, how you do them, how you organize stuff with the team? How do you ensure that your team of 50 is a great team culture and that everybody is getting along and working at their peak performance?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think like many people, I try to avoid meetings as much as reasonably practical. But at a certain point, they're necessary. I do want to have a specific outcome desired when we get into a room, like what is the objective that we're trying to seek, and make sure that we get to that conclusion by the end. The other thing that I'm trying to instill.
How would your employees describe you?
Well, I mean, I think I'll say some of the things that I do that I think are a little bit different than the way that we were operating before. One is that I'm a big fan of data. And this is part of that sort of analytical, technical side that I will go in and I'll spend quite a bit of time in GA or in App Annie or in our various different tools to be able to actually dive in and find trends myself. And that's where you're able to find some of these insights like, wow, menus are up over 100% year over year. That's interesting. What's going on here? Or there are certain other opportunities that I'm not going to make public just yet that we're working on that are, as a result of having dug in and said like, oh, okay, here's what people are searching for. Here are the pages that they're going to that we wouldn't expect them to be going to. So I think I consider myself very hands-on with respect to the tools, and I do have reasonably high expectations for others that they not only are measuring what we're doing, but also that they are they're expecting a certain outcome. If they want to do particular work, let's just do it back of the envelope and say, okay, here's how many people we think will use it times this type of adoption rate and so forth, and here's order of magnitude how much we want to get from this project. Not everything needs to be run by the numbers. I think that's a mistake, but I do think for projects that you're justifying because of revenue or because of customer adoption, then great. What does the math look like? In addition to that, I'd like to set an expectation that we're all using the products very, very regularly. I mean, we're a consumer product, so it's easy. But I do feel pretty passionately that we need to eat our own dog food. We need to be, sort of using what it is that we're bringing out to the market.
Got it. How do you want to be known amongst your employees? If you could say, hey, I want my team to perceive me in this way, what adjectives would you use?
I want to be approachable. I want to encourage innovation and be open.
Cool. And who in your business career had the biggest influence on your management style? If you had to look to one person or one or two people that were your mentors and made the biggest impression on you, maybe they weren't even your direct manager, but just the folks that left a really indelible impression on you, who were they?
Oh, I mean, there are a few folks along the way who I think had a management style that I like to emulate a bit. One is somebody I worked with at Real Networks, Eric Flanagan. He's in New York now, but just a very approachable, open person who also was very, very good at identifying the right suggestions to pursue. So,
And have you ever, let's just jump into the gender topic for a second. Have you ever felt as a female executive that you were ever treated any differently or people perceived you any differently?
I like to think that that's not true. My husband is quick to say like, oh, no, honey, that, you got to realize that you've dealt with people who were very biased in the past. I think that there are certain expectations, and particularly if for those of us who have a strong personality, sometimes it comes across as particularly so because it's not expected from a woman. I remember somebody describing me once as being the type of person who pounded their fist on the table and screamed and yelled, and I never do that. I mean, I swear I never do that. But I think I am.
Like, I swear I never do that.
Don't do it. but I have conviction, and
Yeah.
and I'm forceful in my opinions, and so I think it almost comes across as an exaggerated version of that.
What do you think needs to change to make engineering a more attractive profession for women? Right, we're really lucky to have some amazing, female engineers on our team, but on the whole, you just see a lot less women going
Absolutely.
into engineering. A, is that a problem? And then B, if it is, what will change that?
So it's absolutely a problem, and I think the biggest reason, it's practicality, right? I mean, we need more engineers. We need good engineers. It's taken me months and months to find our iOS developers, our most recent hires. And so, and particularly troubling is the fact that you see young women who are graduating from high school with equivalent or at times even better science and math scores, and yet in massive numbers are migrating away from science, technology, engineering.
Why do you think
degrees.
that is?
I don't have an answer for it, other than at a certain point, it almost becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. That it is intimidating when you're, when you're the one of 3 women in a CS class of 100 guys, right? And so I think that the industry in general needs to think through how we're going to solve this, because unfortunately the problem's getting worse and not better. There are fewer women now in computer science, percentage-wise than 20 years ago. So it is definitely a concern.
Is that just because the programs have gotten so large and they're getting an influx with men, or is it because something, again, systematically has changed over the last 20 years that it moves women away from those programs?
Yeah, I mean, well, some researchers would tell you that there is this sort of unintentional bias. There's an unintentional set of expectations that are given to women, and at that critical point between high school and college, they're getting messages from society, from various people, that they will be more successful if they opt for non-technology careers. And I have to say that technology, engineering paths in college are hard. I mean, they are not easy. And I was this perfectionist coming out of high school, sort of straight A's, valedictorian type, right? And I got my worst grade ever at Stanford was in computer science class. I got a B-, and I was horrified. It was tragic. It was really bad for me at the time. And so. But then, of course, experience teaches you a little bit more that your GPA
Was that
really,
an undergrad or grad school?
That was undergrad. Yeah, that your GPA really doesn't matter that much, especially the further you are from school. It really doesn't matter that much, and that your degree type is in fact a little bit more influential. And so, rather than having done the economics undergrad that I did, I would have preferred to have gone in. With a CS or engineering degree.
And do you have some good cred with your engineers? It must be, I mean, any CEO that at some point, was an engineer, I feel like you got good cred with engineers.
Yeah, every once in a while, it is fun to. Sometimes people don't know that I have that background. Yeah. And then when they find out, they're like, oh wow, okay, she knows what she's talking about. So I'll have to be a little bit more careful.
That's
but
great.
Yeah.
If you had to sum up one key advice, right? I mean, you've had, I think many people would love to be able to have the career you did, right? Where you get to work at lots of different software, internet companies. You get to work with really fascinating leaders where, you drive towards being a CEO of a company and really the sky's the limit from here. What one piece of advice would you give folks that are looking to really make meaningful progress in their career, especially in the tech field?
Yeah, I mean, I think it touches on what I said before, which is just seek variety, right? And be willing to step up and say, I'll try something that I haven't done before, but I see a need in this company for this, right? And articulate what that is, and describe how you'll be able to resolve that, and even better if you can do it while you're doing your day job, right? Because those are the types of projects and activities that will get you noticed, get you promoted, get you the opportunity to take on more.
Great.